cargo ship with a mystery hold that had spent months quietly running between Chinese ports and Iran decided on April 19th to test whether the American naval blockade was real. The U.S. Navy's answer was cannon fire into the engine room. In the weeks following Operation Epic Fury, United States and Israeli forces struck targets across Iran, including the naval base at Bandar Abbas, where Iran lost a submarine and a forward support ship. Tehran's response was to restrict passage through the Strait of Hormuz, the key shipping lane through which 1/5 of all global oil supply moves every single day. If its assets were going to be hit, the world's energy supply was going to feel it too. The United States responded with a naval blockade of Iranian ports on April 13th. Nothing gets in or out without American permission. For 6 days, 25 commercial vessels turned around or returned to port without a single shot being fired. Every captain looked at the situation and backed down. The blockade was working without incident. On the 19th, guided missile destroyer USS Spruance was on a routine patrol in the Gulf of Oman, just outside the Strait of Hormuz, when her crew picked up a contact, moving at 17 knots toward Bandar Abbas. At 900 feet long and under U.S. Treasury sanctions since 2018. The MV Tuska had spent weeks running between the Chinese port of Zhuhai and various Iranian ports, stopping in Port Klang, Malaysia, a known transit hub for cargo that does not want to be traced. On her final leg toward her destination, the tracking signal went offline. The moment Tuska appeared on radar, Spruance moved in and informed the cargo ship she was in violation of the blockade. After receiving no response, the destroyer pulled alongside and sounded its horn repeatedly. Still nothing. For 6 straight hours, the Iranian crew kept ignoring every warning and headed for Iran. In footage released by United States Central Command, the camera sits right behind the Mk-45 as the sun drops behind the horizon, the horn echoing across the water. Then a final notice cuts over the radio, quote, Motor Vessel Tuska, vacate your engine room. We are prepared to subject you to disabling fire. When she didn't stop, the United States Navy made sure she did. For a few seconds, there was nothing but the sound of water and engines. Then the Mk-45 opened up. Several 5-inch rounds tore directly into the engine room. Noise and smoke swallowed the scene. Tuska was dead in the water. A second published clip from later that night picks up in night vision, green and grainy, a helicopter from the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli, closing in low over the Tuska's deck with ropes already dropping. Marines from the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit landed on cargo containers and immediately fan out across the deck. President Donald Trump confirmed on Truth Social that the U.S. had full custody and that troops were going through what was on board. Yet Iran called it piracy, threatened retaliation, and accused the U.S. of violating a 2-week ceasefire, with negotiations between the two sides already scheduled in Pakistan for the following day. With the only ship that dared to break through America's naval blockade now detained, her crew in custody, and her hold being searched, and the video of exactly how that happened available to anyone who wants to watch it, whatever Tehran considered too important to turn around for, may never be publicly confirmed. Still, the route she was running and the hours her crew spent ignoring every warning suggest it mattered enough to give it a try. Ukraine achieved something that had never been done before, shooting down an enemy drone from an unmanned ship, and it was all caught on camera. In a clip released by Ukraine's Unmanned Systems Forces, a driving electronic soundtrack plays as a hatch on the deck of a small boat snaps open. Inside, a row of powerful interceptor drones sit waiting. One launches. Then the camera's point of view is suddenly from the interceptor itself, tearing across open sky toward a Shahed, a cheap Iranian-made one-way attack drone, the target growing fast in the frame until impact. What made that shot possible was the Magura, Ukraine's latest naval weapon. A small crewless combat vessel developed by the main intelligence directorate and operated entirely by remote control, built specifically to do what Ukraine's conventional navy could not, all without putting a single sailor at risk. In 2023, 3 of these vessels attacked a Russian Navy intelligence ship hundreds of miles from Ukrainian shores. Since then, the Magura has struck 14 Russian ships, sinking 8, including a guided missile corvette and a 4,000-ton tank landing ship, and forced what remained of Russia's Black Sea fleet to retreat from Ukrainian waters. But Russia had found another way to use that same water. From the very first days of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, Moscow has bombarded Ukrainian cities with Shahed drones, arriving in swarms of dozens at a time, flying low, slow, and cheap. However, Shaheds that fly over water are largely untouchable by ground-based air defense. No radar coverage, no missile battery, no interceptor drone operator is close enough to engage them before they cross back over land and find a city. The Black Sea became a free corridor that Ukraine had no answer for. So Ukraine mounted an interceptor drone directly onto the Magura platform, turning it into a floating launch pad that could position itself anywhere on the water and send a drone into the air the moment a Shahed appeared overhead. On April 19th, the 412th Nemesis Brigade put that to use for the first time. Named after the Greek goddess of divine retribution, it operates exclusively within Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, running combat missions in the maritime operational zone with no crewed vessels involved at any point. Working from a safe distance, its operators guided a Magura into position, opened the hatch, and sent an interceptor drone climbing into the sky above the Black Sea. The entire operation, from launch to intercept, was executed remotely. Ukraine's unmanned systems forces confirmed it was a world first. Ukraine demonstrated that a single platform with no crew can operate on the surface of the water and in the air above it at the same time. With the Shaheds now having something hunting them from below, according to Sam Bendit, an unmanned systems expert, quote, "This capability adds another protection layer for Ukrainians against incoming Russian long-range drones. It makes Shaheds even more vulnerable." Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky warned this week that more than 110 Russian Shadow fleet vessels are at sea right now, carrying over 12 million tons of oil, worth around $10 billion. Quote, "Every dollar from Russian oil is money for war." Russia spent 3 years treating the Black Sea as a highway for this valuable route. Ukraine just put a toll on it. China may have forced America's most expensive bomber to change its design, and the evidence is hiding in plain sight in a set of newly released Air Force photos. On April 14th, the United States confirmed the first B-21 Raider mid-refueling test above Edwards Air Force Base. The first B-21 prototype, nicknamed Cerberus, flew a 5-hour, 33-minute mission over eastern California at 23,000 feet, connecting to a specialized KC-135 tanker carrying instrumentation to monitor every detail of the aerodynamic interaction. This marks the latest major milestone for the next-generation stealth bomber program. At $700 million per aircraft, one of the most expensive and classified in American history, it's designed to penetrate the most heavily defended airspace on Earth and deliver nuclear or conventional weapons without being detected. Though most people looking at those photos saw the landmark mission, a handful of analysts saw something different in its exhaust. For years, reporting on the B-21 had described its configuration as a near copy of the B-2 Spirit, the quadrangular slot design that's defined American stealth bomber geometry since the 1980s. But the new photos, taken from the KC-135 tanker looking directly down the refueling boom at the B-21, showed clean circular openings with no special material visible behind them. In January, researchers at China's Aerodynamics Research and Development Center, known as CARD-C, published a peer-reviewed paper about their creation of an AI platform called PAD-JX. This all-in-one aerospace simulation software can supposedly analyze the aerodynamics, propulsion, and more of any aircraft of any military. To demonstrate its capabilities, the research team applied the software to the B-21's configuration, photos, videos, and other publicly available information. It claimed to have identified aerodynamic instability in the flying wing design and specific vulnerabilities in the exhaust configuration, which reflected radar energy in ways that could be detected and exploited. But others believe the answer is far older than January. In 2011, a former Northrop engineer named Moshe Gawadia, who'd worked specifically on the B-2's exhaust design, was convicted and sentenced to 32 years in prison for selling those exhaust secrets to Chinese agents, meaning the blueprint was compromised years before the B-21 ever left the ground. Whether the new circular exhausts visible in the spring 2026 photos are a response to Gawadia, to Pad JX, or to something else entirely, nobody outside Northrop and the Air Force knows. Some analysts have pointed out that Pad JX was working solely from public photos, suggesting China may have flagged a vulnerability that American engineers had already solved years ago on the B-2. Others are less generous. One of the most consequential drone contracts in American history will be decided this summer, and the company that just handed its aircraft to elite warfighters may have already won. In this program, called the Collaborative Combat Aircraft, instead of sending a pilot into the most dangerous airspace in the world alone, a cheap, autonomous, and most importantly, expendable drone is set to be its partner, ready to absorb the risk, while the human makes the most important decisions. Currently, 2 companies are competing for this ambitious contract: Anduril, with its YFQ-44A, and General Atomics, with its YFQ-42A. Both have been flying prototypes since 2025. Both completed critical design review in November 2024. The Air Force wants at least 1,000 in service by the end of this decade. In February 2026, the YFQ-44A flew with live AIM-120 air-to-air missiles attached for the first time. Not a prototype anymore, a weapons platform. Then, the week of April 14th, the Air Force's Experimental Operations Unit arrived at Edwards Air Force Base and took over completely. The EOU was specifically created to figure out how to fight with new technology before it's declared operational. The men and women showed up with days of training, picked up the controls, and ran every sortie themselves. In photos from the exercise, EOU airmen are on the flight line at Edwards, performing maintenance, loading weapons, and prepping the aircraft for the next sortie. Most notable is what is not in those photos: engineers. There was no manufacturer support, no large infrastructure, and no specialists standing over anyone's shoulder. Everything, from pre-flight checks, weapons loading, taxi, takeoff, in-flight tasking, and even post-flight data, was handled by a small team of warfighters. All of it runs off Anduril's Menace-T system, a ruggedized command kit that runs off a laptop. Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Jensen, the EOU commander, was direct about what that means. Quote, "We are learning by doing, at a speed and risk tolerance accepted by the USAF's most senior leaders, to ensure CCA is ready to operate and win in the most demanding combat environments." Anduril's Vice President of Autonomous Air Power, Mark Schuschner, framed the larger point. Quote, "When it comes to fielding any first-in-class capability, building the new technology itself is only part of the challenge. Equally important is the work required to actually integrate it into a pre-existing force structure." The YFQ-44A flew from Anduril's Southern California test site to Edwards, where the EOU took over, flew daily sorties, and returned the aircraft when the exercise was done. From first flight in October 2025 to warfighter-operated combat sorties in April 2026, the program moved from prototype to operational candidate. Of course, General Atomics has not been sitting still. Its YFQ-42A is expected to begin weapons integration testing in the very near future, and the company has spent decades building combat-proven unmanned systems. But Anduril just demonstrated something in public that General Atomics has not yet matched. A warfighter with days of training, a laptop, and no engineer in sight, flying combat sorties in one of the most ambitious autonomous aircraft programs in American history.